Now it's time to use 2 glazes on 1 dessert. I'll use an apricot glaze, then a shiny chocolate glaze to finish off my Sacher Torte. Now, this cake is rich, but at the same time, almost like a sponge cake. So I am whipping egg whites. I've separated 7 eggs. While I'm whipping these on high speed, I'll add 2/3 of a cup of sugar, adding it gradually as I whip to a soft peak. You get such great volume when you whip 7 egg whites. And you know, it really reminds me about the history of this torte. This is a classic, and it's been around for ages. It's named after the Sacher Hotel in Austria. So now that whites are taken care of, I'm just going to set them aside and take care of the base. I have half a cup of unsalted butter that's warm to room temperature. And I'm going to sift in 1 cup of icing sugar. Now I'm switching to a paddle to cream the butter and icing sugar together. Now I'm ready to add the 7 egg yolks that I saved from the 7 whites that I separated out. There we go. Now for a teaspoon of vanilla, quick mix. And I'm going to add my 6 ounces of cooled chocolate. I'll give this a quick mix to blend it all in. I want to get my dry ingredients ready. Just a cup of cake and pastry flour and just half a teaspoon of salt. Now what I do is alternate folding in the egg whites and the flour. Now I'll add some of the flour. Now another 1/3 of the whites. Rest of my flour. And the final addition of the whites. Okay, now I've prepared my pan, a 9-inch springform pan that I've greased and lined the bottom and sides with parchment. In goes the batter. And I've preheated my oven to 325. And this cake, because it is essentially like 2 layers in one, does take 50 to 60 minutes to bake. It's out of the oven, and I let it cool completely in the pan. You can tell a lot of work went into developing a style of cake like that when it's so perfectly flat and straight. My first glaze is an apricot glaze. There's really nothing to making this apricot glaze. Take apricot jam and puree it to smooth out the fruit pieces, push it through a strainer, and then it's ready to use. The first thing I need to do is slice my cake in half. And I don't go across from one side to the other, but I rotate and I slowly cut inwards towards the center of the cake. And as you're slicing, you can feel the knife working its way through, and all of a sudden, it releases. There. It only takes a sheer layer of this apricot glaze. You don't need a lot to taste it. This goes right on top. And now I do the same, a sheer layer of jam on the top and the sides of the cake. Don't worry if the glaze runs off the cake a little bit. There we go. Give it a nice smoothing. So now is the perfect time to make the chocolate glaze. Now, this is what defines a Sacher Torte, this shiny chocolate layer. First, I start with 3/4 of a cup of water, and I add to that 1.5 cups of sugar. I also have 6 ounces of bittersweet chocolate. I'm going to turn the heat on high and grab a whisk. I need to cook this up to 232. When the chocolate is first melting into the sugar solution, it won't look smooth, but once it starts coming to a full simmer, then you'll see all of a sudden, poof, it gets glossy and smooth. There we go. Now that it's reached a simmer, I'll switch to a spatula and I'll just keep gently stirring it. And now that I've hit 232, I'll just take it off the heat and let it cool only for a minute or two. I'll go grab my cake from the fridge. In order to get ready for the glazing, I have a baking tray lined with parchment and I've put a cooling rack on top. That way, any glaze that doesn't stick on the cake will spill onto the parchment paper. And here's a case where you just let gravity do its thing. I'm gonna ladle the glaze on and coax it towards the edges, but just let it cascade off the sides. My glaze is still a little bit pliable, so I'll transfer it onto my serving platter. And now this is ready for the fridge. Now, if you worked at the Sacher Hotel, what you would do is actually pipe the word Sacher on in chocolate. Since we're not at the Sacher Hotel, I'm gonna get creative. I've put so much work into this beautiful cake and this shiny glaze, I don't want to hide it or mask it. So I'm just going to add some straight lines. Let it go across. While the glaze is still soft, a couple of little candy dragées. I love how you can see the apricot glaze peeking out from the middle and underneath the chocolate glaze.